This week, I think, and I think because like I got to get my out of my mindset of what I think of when it comes to assessment. So when I read this week, I was like, like it just wasn't like I had it last the other couple weeks. I was kind of like, oh, this makes sense. This week, like it still made sense, but like my head when I think of assessment, I think like when we were in school, it was a test to check for understanding. When I was in school, it was still like CRCT, so you had like your multiple choice answers. Like we never had to like prove anything or write sentences or statements. So I read two different chapters. One of them was an investigation of African American students' mathematical problem solving. Just was interested because I know that like every school I've been at, African American students are usually like on the lower end, like they struggle in ways that other students do not. So I was just curious as to see what they were looking at. And I feel like regardless of what we are reading in the book, it just goes back to like conceptual understanding, being able to problem solve, being flexible in your thinking. So they had to complete these different sessions, and in those sessions they had like five think aloud problems. So they sat down with somebody, they worked through the problems one at a time, and they like just were like saying their thoughts out loud, so whoever was like listening to them could understand what their thinking were. And then like afterwards they would interview the students to kind of get their thoughts. They figured out that they took a holistic approach, which is like they looked at the entire thing. They didn't really kind of get out, they didn't really take out the information that wasn't necessary. They try to approach the problem as a whole problem. Each of the questions, though, had you were able to use multiple strategies to solve it. They varied in difficulty, and they should have been able to use the holistic or analytic approach. And then they required like different levels of reasoning with the information. The biggest thing I think was, hey, can you get out, please? The biggest thing I think was just seeing that they take the holistic approach, and then they were confident. I think what got me was even though they were confident about their mathematical thinking, it did not make them like I guess it didn't improve their scores, which was crazy to me because I'm always telling my students like what you think is kind of how what you get. So if you think you can, there's a possibility that you'll do well. But if I'm telling myself that I can't, then pretty much that's what's going to happen because you've already counted yourself out. So I was kind of shocked to see that. But for the most part, it was just like they needed support to help just help them become analytical thinkers, help them like be able to take out what didn't matter. A lot of them did try to go back and reread the problem. So the biggest thing was just like giving them support, providing them with support so they could become those type of thinkers. And then like they place emphasis on like just making sure as teachers we are meeting the needs and we're like not counting them out. We're not saying like, oh, this is how they've always performed. So just I guess having high expectations for those students like you would any other student. And then the other one kind of was the same thing. I read it because it dealt with functions, and we will be moving into functions next month. So it was like students' conceptual knowledge of functions. They use a computer intensive algebra program that required them to like problem solve and use real world application. They talked about the four components of functions, which are modeling. So I guess like being able to represent a function in a problem situation and being able to use like the equations, the tables, the graphs, being able to interpret those same things. So like what is an input telling you, what is an output telling you, being able to see that that can be interpreted through tables, graphs, equations, different things of that scenario. Translating, so again, it goes back to being able to translate the information from the different representations. And then the last one, which was refining, I don't go that far in my teaching. So I also wasn't surprised that it was an issue. So no matter what program was used, like whether it was traditional or the computer based that was used, every student struggled with that part. And it's just trying to get them to not see it as a like procedural or process and kind of be able to think more deeply about it. And like when I was looking at the book, it reminded me of, I guess when you have like f of x and then you put like g of x in there. And in my head, like I remember solving these and how to solve these, but even as a teacher, like I don't even know what to tell my students how to like get through that part. So it was kind of cool to see that. But Biggest thing is I do think with the new Inspire lessons that we are able to help our students see the four, well, at least for me, eighth grade, the three different components. So I think they can model, interpret, and translate. Especially now, like I use the input output table so they can see like if this number is going in, this number is coming out. They can kind of see how the graph corresponds with the table and how that goes with the equation. I think the hardest for me, and I'm hoping to improve on that this year, is like the scenarios and getting them like with the y-intercept, that's where you begin, and the slope, that's like your rate of change and things of that nature. So I do think it's possible. It's just figuring out methods that will be able to do that. So for me, I think I was just more so looking for a test, which technically I guess they did do an assessment. I was just more so thinking it was going to be like maybe a milestones assessment, something that's like trying to find like one little thing. But I feel like mathematically, out of all the readings, the biggest thing I got from everything was like making sure we use conceptual understanding to build on procedural so they know and understand why and like what they're doing, why it's working, how it's working. And then they get to the point of being able to use the procedures and the processes and the steps, but they got to be able to understand or be flexible. Like I do think prior to becoming a teacher, I wasn't a flexible person. I was like a kid that if you gave me the procedure, I can give you an outcome. And now that I actually teach and I'm teaching for conceptual understanding or like trying to make sure they understand why they're doing things, like I'm actually learning different ways and methods. So it's kind of nice to see that like at first I was resistant because I was like, this is stupid. Just tell me 2 + 2 = 4. But now that I kind of see what it's doing for me and my students, I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense. This is nice. But that's pretty much what I got from it. Just assessments are not just here's a paper, write down your answer. It's more so like for me was like building on students' understanding so they when they get to the point of testing, they can be successful.